infections, infestations. He couldn't even sit up, couldn't even raise his head off the bed. All he could say was dada. He had one tooth, and he was written off as mentally retarded. Nothing, he could never do anything. But I saw the light in this child's eyes, and I said, okay, I'm going to work with this kid. We got him to the point where he was walking, talking, emotional, great sense of humor in this kid. He became adopted by an American family. He's now actually been out in Iraq. He's in the military, which is his choice, and an amazing young man.
How beautiful.
Yeah. So there were challenges with some wonderful outcomes.
One of the things that I've noticed in my life is that all of the good works require a commitment, a passion, a connection, but also at a certain point, good works that expand also require funding. I would think that people would be calling you all the time to help them find suitable funding, the funding sources, whether it's methods, whether it's investments, or whether it's actually funding sources, people and groups that will fund whatever it is that they're up to. I know that there are people who want to provide orphanages around the world that need funding, not only the physical types of support, but funding. Could you help with that?
I have done. Not so much with funding orphanages, but for my main client, I've done a lot of work in that respect. For example, when he was selling his business, helping him to ascertain the best routes that he could take, the best people to work with. And I work partially what's called front-loaded when I do my applications work. In remote viewing, there's the idea that the viewer has to work completely blind, which means they have no upfront information. And I have worked in that respect. But when you're working applications, sometimes you have to have a certain direction in which to go. And Lynn Buchanan, I'm sure, has talked about that. So with my client, I've been able to help him locate funding, locate potential buyers for his business. And also recently, I had a researcher email me, and not so much remote viewing, but just straightforward research knowledge, finding some funders for some parapsychological research he was carrying out.
That's fantastic. In the world that we live in today, there's a big change with regard to the structures in which people fund their organizations. And with the tax laws changing and different jurisdictions are changing, I believe that there are still certain jurisdictions that are better suited for different endeavors, that will provide a better, more suited structure for what people want to do legally. And so I think that one of the applications that would be really helpful, I think, to remote view is when somebody comes to you with a project, to be able to remote view how it should be structured. You know, let me give you an example and the kind of legality that's involved. This may not be immediately applicable, but it's an example. When Muhammad Yunus formed the Grameen Bank in Dhaka, Bangladesh, he went to the Bank of Bangladesh and the government got involved in funding that organization. Well, this was about providing credit to people that didn't fit the traditional criteria of credit, uncollateralized lending. And he visioned and built and inspired not only a new organization, but a new organism of consciousness, protocol, process, way of doing business, and thinking about credit for the poor, and made things possible that nobody else in banking in the history of the world has ever done as we know it. Last week, Muhammad Yunus was removed from his own banking system for political reasons. And I was on a conference call with the Grameen Foundation a few weeks ago before the final decision was made. And the question I asked was, where was legal counsel at coming up with the structure of this? How come he was in a position to be removed? The man never did anything wrong to be treated that way. How come he was set up in a position like that? And when it really came down to it, it was about the structure of the agreement between him and the people that removed him.
Yeah.
And so it reminds me that in the formation of new ventures, there's consciousness in structure, and that is animate, and it lives and breathes as the ground in which everything then is going to come. Well, they waited till he built everything into billions of dollars and then removed him. This is a guy who barely took a salary, lives in a little apartment in the Grameen building. You know, he's kind of like Gandhi in banking. So one of the things I think is going to be very pertinent for people that have socially beneficial projects that they want to be successful and are guided to do that is to be able to call upon a remote viewing practitioner like yourself to help with some of that. Those early beginnings create the frequency and the consciousness and tell a tale of what could happen later. The thing is that most people look at the legal and structuring side as just a part of the business stuff. Like it's a big deal, but it's not that big a deal, but it is a big deal.
Yeah. My take on that is in going into any venture, and either into straight business or into remote viewing, you have to use both sides of the brain. You have to use your left brain and right brain, to be simplistic. You have to be intuitive, you have to be creative and able to see out of the box, but you also have to use your common sense. You have to use logic. So we're given a brain. We're not just given an intuitive brain, we're also given a logical brain. And I really feel that both sides of a person needs to be brought into play. And it sounds like the people that set up the initial the structure you were talking about, were very much into one mindset. And then the other mindset stepped in and said, okay, now we're going to run it this way. Every project needs to incorporate and to blend both sides. So you do need the logical things of the world, because you need to be aware we're going to live in the world. But we also need to retain that intuitive, softer side of our psyches.
What do you think about the fact that you've learned two different methodologies or translations of remote viewing from two totally different top-level people in the field? And how do you see the integration, having learned remote viewing from two totally different people?
With the two teachers, I learned many things from both of them. So I tend to stick with the original Ingo Swann terminology rather than shift around between them, just to simply keep things simple. And also, if I'm doing CRV for clients out in the regular world, they know the CRV terminology and it's understandable to them. Lynn's is less so, unfortunately. But from Lynn, I learned a lot of alternative ways of doing RV that I often incorporate. And also, I incorporate the extended remote viewing into my remote viewing practice. If I'm working a project totally blind, that's it. That is, I just get a coordinate, a series, like a case number, and I'm working totally blind, I will use CRV, because that way there's no
front
interference, no front loading, nothing. You just get data. However, if I'm working for my main business client, I'll very often use the extended remote viewing, because he'll have a specific question of something unknown that he needs to find out. So I will use the extended, where I sit quietly, send my mind to the question, and write down what I perceive. And so I incorporate, there's a synthesis of all of the different methods that I've used, that I've learned.
Do you see your shamanic work coming into play in any way when you personally are remote viewing? Or do you feel that that's kind of in the background? You're not activating that. You're doing something different.
Partly it's there in the background, but I do include, for certain clients that I know are knowledgeable and accepting of the alternative traditions, I will bring in runes. I will use my rune stones in my remote viewing, particularly if I'm doing CRV. and for certain clients. So the